everybody, Craig from Bass Lessons Melbourne here. Today I'm joined by David Searle from DJS Guitars. Thanks very much for coming along, David.
Thank you for having me.
We've had a great afternoon so far playing lots of David's lovely basses so far. David's a luthier, obviously, and he also teaches people how to build their own guitars and basses. So what we're going to do today is get David's opinion from the builder side of things on construction techniques and woods, all the things that kind of go into making a bass, and his opinion and experience on the effect that can have on tone and playability, and so forth and so on. So yeah, great to have you here, David.
Thank you.
The first thing I want to talk about is the importance of, or the impact that woods has on the tone of the bass. It is an electric instrument, but yet the acoustic properties of wood do have an impact on the sound of the bass. So maybe you could talk us through a little bit about classic tone combinations.
Absolutely. A lot of these things are well documented as far as some of the classic timbers that are used in bass construction. And I deal with this with my students. It's one of the first things that we talk about when we're building basses and so forth, when we're doing that type of thing. And that is, what effects do the timbers have? And I always tell the students that it's rather a little bit like baking a cake. You put certain materials into the cake, and it's going to end up a certain way. You know, if you put chili into the cake, it's going to be a hot cake, sort of thing. So it's a bit like that with any stringed instrument construction. So certain materials will give you a certain outcome. If you've got things like an ash body, whether it's a swamp ash or a northern ash, you've got a fairly scooped, bright sounding sort of body that's going to happen in there, and you match it with maple neck and maple fretboard, and you're going to get something that's pretty aggressive. It's going to be really quite a bright sounding, aggressive instrument. There are other materials, mahogany, that has more of a mid and a bottom end sound to it when you incorporate it into the body. And you've got other materials like alder, and I've got an alder bass over there in the rack at the moment that has a very neutral sound. It's alder sort of gives you equal parts of, bottom, mid and top end. And you hear that come through in a lot of the classic Fender guitars and Fender basses. Right. Your classic jazz bass thing, when you do hear a lot of the 60s type of jazz basses, they've got quite a balanced sort of sound to them. And then you get some of the bright slapping type basses, your Marcus Miller type things that are ash built, and you sort of go, that's bright for a reason. And it's like it's built for a certain type of thing. Modern building, and when it comes to things like neck-through construction and bolt-on construction, can affect things as well. And what I've found with a lot of the contemporary type of builds, there are certain materials that really get you a long way towards that really big, deep, rich, modern sound that we sort of associate with some of the American upmarket bass builders, things like Federa and so forth. Some of the materials that they're using, and I've actually replicated a lot within my own builds, magic materials as I call them, things like American black walnut, and using that with maple. Walnut, very, very good for that sort of really sort of almost a compressed but really big, rich mid and bottom end. Get a little bit of top end sizzle coming off there as well. But and I like to, fortunately it's still available really quite widely. Furniture makers use it a lot, so we can get it in this country. That's always something to think about as a builder in Australia as well. The availability of timbers can be a really complex thing to try to get around. Just recently I bought all the elder in Australia. Like, I bought the lot. There's none other, I've really got the lot. There was only one company bringing it into the country, and we were using it for our courses that we were running at TAFE. And when we decided to pull the pin on that, because we'll be doing it ourselves very soon, I knew that they had a stockpile of it, and I bought the lot. So other people have been calling me up saying, that timber, And it's like, I've got it, sort of thing. I bought everything.
Okay.
So some timbers are more available than others. Unfortunately, walnut is, because of the furniture people, is still available. But it's magic material for basses to get into that classic neck-through construction, New York type build.
Okay.
Of walnut. Walnut is really good. Now we've actually got a couple of basses here that this one here is a neck through type of type of bass, and it has a walnut in the back of the body, and that one there does as well. So if you flip that one over, you'll actually sort of see some like type materials in the back there. These came from the same stick of walnut in that type of thing, and their construction in the middle is maple, and then they've got a fancy cap on the front there. They've actually got soft maple on the top.
I know sometimes these are referred to as tone caps.
Tone. No, the caps.
Have you found any effect of
on the top? No,
of that? Nah.
No, they don't. It's only a small amount. These ones here probably got around about 6 mil in the top of them, so they're not actually having much bearing over the overall sound of the instrument at all. Yeah. Federa came up with the terminology tone block for whatever was happening in the back. This one doesn't have it. That one does. Yeah. It's actually a piece of maple in the back there that's connected to the wenge or wenge, depending on how you say it, in through there. And they do a lot of that sort of stuff. A lot of manufacturers have copied this sort of thing. I don't think that actually has a lot of bearing on the sound either, by the way, because I think it's mainly about what the main part of the neck is built with. And I do have a bit of a theory about that possibly they're saying, it's a tone block, and it does have something to do with it, but it may be actually more about using the maple that they put into their necks more economically. I think it actually might be a financial decision that they took originally.
Could also be a weight thing? No.
Oh, it can, but they use different materials in that part of the body as well. So knowing how timber comes, the thicknesses, I'm talking about commercially when you've actually got to buy it as raw material, how that comes and what the most economical way to buy it. I think they're actually buying it, and the way that they actually splice their headstocks together and so forth. It's like they've, at some stage way back, might have been 20, 25 years ago, they've gone, we've got to build it this certain way, and we've got to laminate something in the back there because we can only get our material at the right price at that sort of thickness. Yeah. Nobody's come up with that theory yet, but I'm looking at it from a builder side and going, They're economics, and they've called it a tone block, and isn't it a feature and lots of stuff. But I don't know. That's a I might have people upset about that too. But
it's only a good thing in this day and age.
It's a theory. It's one of those types of things, and I've gone, no, as a builder, it's certainly a lot cheaper to build that way with a tone block in the back of the thing. It's cheaper. You don't have to buy big, thick sections of timber.
And while we're on this topic, neck through versus bolt on.
Big difference in the way that they sound. So from a construction side of things, there's a lot more complexity in a neck through to actually build a neck through, and that's reflected in prices, and you see that commercially, not just in my work, but other people's makes as well. The complexity is that you've got to set them up and get them correctly set up. The geometry's got to be right for them to actually work as an instrument that isn't compromised, that when you put the hardware on it, it's not this weird thing that just physically doesn't work anymore. You've got on the neck through thing, you've actually got beautiful accessibility all the way to the top. And that's the beauty of all that type of construction, whether it's a guitar or a bass. You've got better accessibility than a bolt-on type of neck. Downside is I suppose when you're working on an instrument, you've got the whole thing as one piece. You can't work on it as two separate parts. You can't do a production run of the bodies and a production run of the necks and then bring them together at the end. And even when I teach people how to build basses, until they get a little bit further down the track, and because there is more complexity in the build and construction, we focus on the bolt-on type necks with that type of thing, because we can separate the two halves and go, okay, we're working on the body, now we're working on the neck.
And tonally?
Tonally different, yeah, they're quite different. I find that the bolt-ons are far more immediate in their sound, so you get a snappier, really immediate sound out of them. And it's a well-noted thing, even in the guitar, like six-string guitar type of thing. It's like comparing a Stratocaster to a Les Paul. Les Pauls are glued in; they're not neck through, admittedly, but they're what's going on there. Just to sort of explain it in a mechanical sort of sense, with a bolt-on type of neck, the body becomes excited by the bass, or in this case bass strings, really rapidly. It's like the whole thing becomes, the sound-wise, reacts quickly to the striking of the note and playing of the note. But with a neck through, you've got a bloom in there. It's kind of, the head thing's heavier. it's much more dense. The whole thing is, literally as one piece, and it takes a little bit longer for the string to get the whole body vibrating. So it's almost like this big fat bloom. You get the initial note attack, and then the sound blossoms afterwards. It sort of fattens out. So you can change things with pickups and electronics and so forth. But that's a noted thing it's been, I suppose, really quite well known in the six-string guitar side of things. But I really hear it in these sorts of instruments as well. This is an interesting one with the wenge or wenge neck. This thing here, I expected when I put this one together, it's got an ebony fretboard on the thing, but I expected with this to be brighter and snappier, but it's not. This is actually quite a deep, complex sound in this sort of thing, far more so than the maple on maple type of thing.
They kind of sound how they look.
Yeah.
On one hand,
it's
kind of chocolatey.
Yeah,
it's a bit
and
more,
it does. Yeah, bright and blingy.
Buttery and blingy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got that sort of thing. Got that sort of thing going on.
My first bass was an old Ibanez musician.
Really? Yeah.
And that was neck through because they were copying the Alembic.
I've got a six-string version of that.
The guitar?
A guitar, 1978 one. It was my very first guitar. So.
And I remember buying it, neck through, and I was kind of young and impressionable, and I just had this thing in my head, neck through was better.
Yeah.
But it's just, it's different, right? It's what we talked about, it's horses for courses.
It is.
It's just a different sound,
It is.
Yeah, cool.
It is.
And similar to that vein, we were talking earlier about body through stringing versus front loading on the bridge, because I have a bass that has the option to string through the body.
Yep.
My old Lakeland Darryl Jones, I could string through body.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, I think there's a common perception that it gives you more sustain or a tighter sound. And after a while of trying to find strings that could fit, I realised there really didn't seem to be any difference from stringing through the bridge and stringing through the body. Is there any science behind it? Does it make a difference?
I don't know about the science. But sound-wise, I can't hear the difference.
Yeah.
I really can't. I've built things with string throughs, and certainly the bridges that I use a lot of hip shop bridges and so forth in my construction. I've got the option of going through. I don't bother. I do the top loading. It's a far more practical thing as far as a working musician to, you have change a string midstream, in the middle of the, not mid-song or anything like that, but mid-gig when something has gone astray. This ability to flick a string out and pop a new one is fantastic, but the sound, maybe there is some validity with that with six-string guitars, where you've got the Telecaster type guitar that has a string through body and out through the top. There's a certain snappiness and tightness about that. I just don't hear it in a bass at all. It's a different kind of energy being generated off those strings that...
The frequencies are a lot lower, I guess,
Yeah.
So it takes a lot more energy for it to happen.
So I've built both ways. Yeah. And again, I came up with exactly the same problem. Some of the grander scales, so these are 35-inch instruments, and when I have to build at 36 and so forth, I can't find strings long enough as well. So it's like you're cornered into really limited types of strings.
And we've talked about that before. If you're going to have a bass of a certain caliber or quality, everybody's different, and everybody prefers different feelings on their fingers. Whether you want stainless steel or nickel, you want to have the option of buying whatever brand and gauge of string you want. And I think that's important when you're making basses, is to not necessarily, I guess it depends on the kind of build. But if you're building a kind of all-rounder bass, like I would say this is a bit of an all-rounder bass, like you want it to have the customer or the player to be able to impart their part on it,
Absolutely. Most of my builds that I'm doing at the moment, it's I deal with the clients one-on-one. We go through design and specs and so forth, and you've got to work with what they want as well. You can't actually force upon them certain types of things. If they say they want a certain type of string and that's what they play, or it's you've got to deal with that as a maker, and so to build things with compromises like string through bodies, it's like, oh gee, and then you go to tell them, okay, you've $4,000 or $5,000 bass, you can only use one type of string on the planet. That's a problem.
It is. That's a bit. And also, bass players were fickle. A year later, we might go, do you know what? I want to change.
Yeah.
And having that option is definitely a good thing.
There is also one other thing with string through. You can kind of get away with it, but there, anecdotally, because I have asked about this particular type of thing, and that's with flat wounds. There's a lot of flat wound players out there, and to put a big break angle on a flat wound string over a bridge,
because the tapers
because of the wrap, you can almost sort of like where it wraps, they almost come open and expose the centre core where they actually come across there. And I've asked questions about that through Ausbase Forum and so forth, and some people go, I've been doing it for years, it's all good. But sometimes other people have identified catastrophic failure mid-song kind of thing, where she comes apart sort of thing, and it's always on one of the bottom ones or something like that, where they're really going at it, and that's not what you want either. So that it doesn't happen with the top loader. It's just not going to.
And I guess linked to that, string gauge. I was talking to you earlier on about. On my F bass, I like to use a fairly light gauge B string.
Yes.
Because I find that gets rid of more overtones. So the lighter the gauge, I guess it's going to be pulled tighter.
The lighter the gauge, generally you've got less physical
tension
on it. You don't need as much tension to actually keep the thing at tune. So the heavier the gauge string, the more tension you've got on it.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. But there's more mass, I guess, so you're maybe more likely to get more. Yeah,
maybe it's actually exciting the body too much, and it's actually introducing overtones with a particular. Like if you're a light player, you can get away with much lighter strings and so forth. But some people are very heavy-handed. I think it's more to do, for me anyway. It's actually more to do with matching the thickness of the strings, and always thinking about in this case what the B is going to actually do. And I'm looking at Bs at 35 and standard like 4 strings and so forth at 34 and under. You can get away with a bit with that sort of stuff. I generally string all these things up with a neutral type of thing. So I'm thinking about what gauge the E string is at say 105. And just going through a standard type of thing. You can probably at 35 you get away with a 120. I've got 125s or 128s depending on the brand. I've got DR strings on some of these things and Federas.
125, 122.
Some around that sort of thing. But they do a lot bigger than that. They go out to 135s and all that sort of stuff. And I think that's probably that's absolutely overkill on a longer scale type of bass. You just don't need that sort of thing for that sort of definition. You certainly do probably on shorter scale to keep the definition in there. But we have a lot of students that prefer lighter gauge strings, and I've picked up some things that have had light gauge strings, and they're beautiful to play, and they get a great sound. As long as it's not too muddy on the bottom end. That's important to have some sort of clarity on that side of things. But again, you can do a lot with your preamp that big massive strings don't necessarily. You can cover a lot with that. If you want a bigger bottom end on the thing, tweak a little bit more on and it's there. Or at the amp as well. So you've got way more control in a bass than you do than a 6-string guitar. There's far more.
Cool.